Thanks for joining me for this week's episode of Live Kind Today, where I'm going to share my movie review on It's a Wonderful Day in the Neighborhood, the latest Mr. Rogers movie, and tell you why I think it just might save Thanksgiving. As you know, Live Kind Today is all about sharing some kindness into the world and making people in your world feel loved, cared for, seen, worthy, and just plain good. You probably had some exposure within your life to Mr. Rogers, whether you were fortunate enough to be a kid of the 70s and 80s that got to watch his show on television, or you've seen the latest documentary on him. But this movie, A Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood, took a little bit of a different approach. I was fully expecting your typical life story kind of a movie, and I was actually really excited to check it out. But like many people in the movie theater commented that it wasn't what we expected. A Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood stars Tom Hanks, Matthew Rhys, and Chris Cooper, all who do an absolutely amazing job. I love that the movie takes on the questioning perspective of Lloyd Vogler, the reporter who is supposed to be doing a bit of a fluff piece on Mr. Rogers for an Esquire Heroes issue. Lloyd and Mr. Rogers meet after, let's say, a stressful family encounter where there's a punch out of him and his father at his sister's, I think, third wedding. Now, whether you can directly relate to that or get the gist, it really sets the stage for what will happen throughout the movie. As the story unfolds, Lloyd Vogler is investigating Mr. Rogers more than trying to interview him. He's trying to find out who the man behind the mystery or the persona is. One of my favorite scenes is when Lloyd and Mr. Rogers are actually riding the subway after shooting at the studio and heading back to his apartment. Well, you suddenly see a whole crowd of people at one end of the train car with police officers and children and adults just staring at him. And then suddenly this little girl yells out, "Hey, Mr. Rogers!" And you have no idea what's going to happen next. Well, everybody breaks out in singing the theme song, and it's not like musical-esque, but it really is basically a way that the public is honoring him by singing It's a Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood. But I also really appreciate the realism. There's a scene about 3/4 of the way through the movie where Lloyd is with his father in his home. They've stepped into a certain point of reconciliation, but his father's really waiting to die, and he asks him for forgiveness. And I appreciate the authenticity because Lloyd sits there and he doesn't actually say anything. And I could be wrong, but I don't think he actually says, "I forgive you." But he does finally kind of break the silence. He tells him that he loves him, which is a massive breakthrough. A little more than halfway through, we find Lloyd and Mr. Rogers together after Lloyd's had, let's call it, a slight breakdown. And Mr. Rogers poses a challenge to him. He says, "Let's just sit here for 1 minute and just think about the people that made you, the people who created you, helped you become who you are. And let's just take 1 minute to think about who all of those people are." That's the moment I'd like us to take into Thanksgiving. So in the US, Thanksgiving's tomorrow. Now, you might have someone in your family or that comes to Thanksgiving that always stirs you up. You don't like talking to them about politics, or their life is on a very different trajectory than yours, or you don't know how to speak to them, or what have you. Think of the ways that those people still make up who you are. Maybe somebody that you disagree with challenges your convictions and rises your values back up to the top that you don't often think about. Maybe the person that's living a very different life than you are, that you have a hard time connecting with, gives an opportunity to think about how the world is different and we live our lives differently. If there's somebody that just gets on your every last nerve and you have to endure through the day with them, just think that they've challenged you to be your better self. But I really challenge you to think about everybody at your table, everybody in that moment, and how they have made you who you are, and be grateful to them. By doing that one thing, you've just invited Mr. Rogers to sit next to you at Thanksgiving. Thanks for joining me today. And if you want to know when new tips drop on how you can live kind, subscribe below. I'd also love for you to share a little bit about your Thanksgiving experiences in the comments below. Well, I wish you all a happy Thanksgiving, and remember to live kind today.